It has been a long 6 years with EA at the helm of Star Wars games, and between The Force Unleashed 2 and Jedi Fallen Order, there have been promising titles like the LucasArts 1313 and Amy Hennig's Project Ragtag being announced, shown off, and subsequently canned. That has added what's felt like an extra 10 years to the wait for a big single-player, story-driven Star Wars title. But thankfully, Titanfall 2 devs Respawn have come to the rescue despite the odd mess that is the game's marketing. Regardless, welcome to Eat Sleep Game. My name is Luke, and this is my review for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
But the boss wants a word. It'll be good for us. Here he is, Chief.
So, let's start with gameplay. Jedi Fallen Order wears its influences directly on its ponchos. It is 1 part Prince of Persia, 2 parts Ratchet and Clank, and a whole lot of Dark Souls. Starting with combat, which is honestly really good. It's really weighty, it's really methodical, and anyone that's played a Souls game before, be it a Bloodborne, an actual Dark Souls, or a Sekiro, will be quite familiar with it. While it may take a little time for others to get used to, it's not too difficult to get to grips with, and it's incredibly satisfying once you get the controls nailed down and you get to hacking and slashing through stormtroopers and creatures alike. There are, of course, a bunch of new skills and combat options that you can unlock throughout the story, be it through your skill tree with skill points that you pick up throughout combat, defeating a boss or legendary beast, or simply completing a plot point throughout the story. You will get these through items that you do also pick up throughout the journey. While a few of these upgrades are a tad unnecessary, they do feel like some things you should just inherently be able to do as a Jedi. For instance, the double jump, it takes you a ridiculously long time just to unlock that, when it should really just be something you potentially have from the get-go. Sticking with combat for just a bit longer, animations can last a few frames a bit too long, and they leave you open and in direct firing line for attack, which doesn't seem to plague your enemies. They're able to cut animations short in order to attack or move on to a block. Now, animations take way too long to actually engage at points as well. Again, just leaving you very open and allowing an enemy who, again, seems unaffected by this, being able to get in the extra attack. This is mostly evident when blocking. So again, the game encourages you to work on your timings, but it can be nearly impossible to counter a lot of the quicker enemies at times due to the animation not acting out quick enough or taking a couple of frames too long to actually come to its fruition. Similarly, the dodge can be absolutely pointless at times, either not giving you enough distance, especially the jumping dodge. The jumping dodge is just pointless. Just don't do it. It's absolutely irrelevant. And again, sometimes the dodge just does not get enacted out quick enough. The amount of times I've been hammering the dodge button only to be cut down by an enemy is absolutely infuriating.
Whoa! Yeah!
Moving on to Traversal now, as this is a Respawn game after all. The wall running is back, and it fits in sublimely like it was always meant to be in Star Wars. Chaining a wall run together with a rope swing and finishing off with an elegant dive and kill might as well have a dismount stance at the end of it as well, as it feels so silky smooth. Cal could qualify for the Olympics with this. The sliding sections are just bad, unfortunately, though. The controls are just too heavy. It makes it feel like you're trying to maneuver the Titanic around a small bend. They're used a bit too frequently as well. Every level has 2, maybe 3 of these at points. And the ones that add obstacles in the way that you have to slow are just a bit too finicky. You cannot be precise, or as precise as the game wants you to. And a lot of the time these sections just come down to dumb luck.
Yeah, I've always said they couldn't all be traitors.
Yeah, maybe.
Guess it's just our lucky day.
Now it's story time. Set 5 years after Order 66, you play as Cal Kestis, a former Jedi Padawan hiding out on a junker planet when he and his friend get sent out on a job which leads Cal to needing to use his Force abilities to save said friend, which of course reveals Cal to the Empire, which leads an Inquisitor called the Second Sister to hunt you down. However, the Empire aren't the only ones who are on your tail. To the rescue come Seer and Pilot Grease, who recruit you to their mission of finding a Jedi holocron, which houses a list of young Force sensitives, which of course needs to stay out the hands of the Empire. There are not too many characters throughout the story that you interact with more than a single encounter, which works well actually to benefit Jedi Fallen Order, because the 4 or 5 characters that you do spend more time with get so much great development. From learning about Cal's backstory and his training, to Seer's history as a Jedi Master and her fall from that, to Grease warming up to Cal, and just everything BD1 really. However, the best character is easily the Inquisitor Second Sister. She is simply awesome in most respects, from her look, her fighting style, and even her intriguing backstory. Not to discredit Cal, I don't think he's as uninteresting as some do, but I did wish I was playing through the Second Sister's story. She is genuinely the most interesting character in the entire game, and I feel playing from the other side and actually playing from the other side, not having that redemption arc that all the others fall for, would have been a lot more interesting and potentially made for a much more intriguing game. Hopefully we get some sort of DLC that's focused on her story, but I feel like it got rounded off quite well in the main game, so I kind of doubt that's going to happen.
Cal Kestis. How predictable. Oh yes, I know your name.
Now, a few of the more intriguing characters that you do meet and learn about tend to lead to a boss fight eventually, and the combination of each of their great development and also the great, if a little frustrating combat, gives the game some truly great boss fights. While there are only a handful, they are quite difficult, but they are extremely satisfying as well, that you don't need more than the few you encounter. Added to this to fill out the game a bit more, however, are a legendary beast in each world, which do tend to be a rage-inducing fight should you go in underpowered and, in my case, underskilled. However, just like the boss fights, they are very, very satisfying once you sever the stupid giant frog head from Ogdo Bodgo and the like. On the whole, Jedi Fallen Order is a beautifully designed game with a handful of different worlds, each with their own style and personality, from the dense, lush greenery hiding numerous unnatural Imperial bases on Kashyyyk to the desolate, barren, and yet untouched worlds of Dathomir. Each world is really well designed, with a good amount of secrets and doors or hidden pathways to go back and unlock, but they're never a slog to revisit, mostly down to the new powers you unlock through the story and how they open up different kinds of shortcuts and new ways to get around the world you've already visited. However, it is quite difficult to look past the graphical issues that I've encountered. Both the amount and sheer scale of some of the pop-in is genuinely mediocre. I genuinely encountered an entire environment pop-in layer by layer for a solid minute or two on Pagano, and I did also encounter a complete game crash during one of the more difficult boss fights, and this is just extremely frustrating. I was playing on the Xbox One X, and this sort of thing shouldn't be happening, especially to this degree. Quick side note, while the visuals are pretty good for the most part, the most consistently terrible looking thing in the game are the Wookiees. They are literally laughable. They are genuinely awful. Another maybe small complaint I have is with the hidden chests. After a few hours, I just completely stopped going out of my way to find these, mostly due to how I knew exactly what was going to be in them and what I was going to get. It's either a lightsaber part, a skin for BD1, or the ship, or a poncho, of which I cared about none of them. Now, I love the design of Cal's lightsaber and the backstory behind it as well, which only strengthened my connection to it and made me not want to interchange the parts. The skins and ponchos did nothing for me either. If they offered some resistance to each world's element, something like Breath of the Wild did, or even just looked like they did, kind of like the Force Unleashed. I would have cared a lot more, but in the end, they just didn't offer any motivation for me to go chest hunting. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the sound design, which on the whole is pretty good. All the sound effects, from the ignition of your saber, a blaster shot, to each indigenous creature, all sound authentically Star Wars and all fit perfectly here in Fallen Order. A special shout out does go to subtle changes in the sound of your saber depending on the color, which I thought was great little inclusion, especially with the orange saber. It sounds heavier and it sounds denser and a bit dirtier. And all of the music also has the same level of authenticism to it as well. Despite most of it being new specifically for the game, it all just fits perfectly, not only into Fallen Order, but into Star Wars as a whole.
Hey, we're here to free you.
Whenever a new Star Wars title is released, there is always the same "does it feel like Star Wars" discussion, which, while can seem odd to people outside of the Star Wars universe, as a huge Star Wars fan, I totally get it. And while Fallen Order doesn't quite feel like Star Wars of old, it does feel like a new branch of the Star Wars mythos, and that is exactly what I wanted. It does have its connections to well-known characters, but for the most part, it forges its own path rather than just retreading well-worn roads. I would have liked Fallen Order to be a bit more ballsy and a bit more risky, and maybe introduce a new force power that we haven't perhaps seen before, just like the newer films have been doing. But there is more than enough room for that in a sequel, which is well deserved and much wanted, especially by me. I adore this game, and that's despite the pop-in, which, as bad as it did admittedly most noticeably only occur early on, and it didn't really ever impede my enjoyment. It was just kind of a noticeable thing. But the rest of the game is very solid, and it all hits its beats so well. It's not perfect, but it sure does feel like the sort of game that has an outstanding sequel in its future.
Hey! Get your lasers off my lunch!